Mario has been all over the map, having taken part in nearly every genre imaginable. He's been in kart racers, sports games, party games, educational games, and he was even in an XCOM-style tactical game a few years ago. And yes, Mario has been the lead man in over a dozen role-playing games. However, that wasn't always the case. Let us reflect on one of the plumber's unique outings in our exclusive Shacknews feature. Back in 1996, everyone knew that Mario was a portly protagonist who fought against the forces of Bowser, the king of the Koopas, to rescue Princess Toadstool, Peach, and save the Mushroom Kingdom. He was part of some of the greatest platformers ever seen in video games, all of which still hold up to this day and have inspired generations of game developers. When that year started, that's all he was. Even after taking a sidestep into a little spin-off called Super Mario Kart, Mario was mainly a platformer character. That changed when Nintendo teamed up with Squaresoft, now known as Square Enix, to take Mario into completely uncharted territory. In 1996, they released Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars, Mario's first official role-playing game. Naturally, all our staff has a lot of love for Mario, so there were a lot of strong opinions flying around. This isn't Mario, or Mario would never do this, or it's not Mario if we don't have this. Those were the words of the head of Square Development Section Number 6 and the co-director of Super Mario RPG, Chihiro Fujioka, given in an October 1995 interview with Family Computer Magazine and Haru. For Fujioka, who had previously worked on the Game Boy's Final Fantasy Legend 3 as a producer, and the Super Nintendo's Final Fantasy Mystic Quest as a writer, this was unlike any challenge he had faced before. Square's Final Fantasy characters were beloved, but were basically featured in self-contained stories. This was different. This was Mario. There was no one-time protagonist. He was the face of Nintendo. To many, he was the most widely recognized face in all of video games. How did this even happen? When did the idea to take Mario from his comfort zone and branch out to this entirely new style of game first come about? The answer shouldn't surprise too many people. The idea came from Mario's creator, Shigeru Miyamoto, who served on Super Mario RPG as the game's producer. He went into the topic during a 1995 interview with Game On magazine. Long before Super Mario RPG got started, I had talked with the staff at Nintendo about wanting to make an RPG that featured Mario. One day we were talking with Square, and they revealed that they wanted to create an RPG that would have a worldwide appeal, with characters that both children and adults would love. We had many meetings and discussions after that, and eventually hit upon the idea of Square Nintendo collaboration that would feature both our strengths. And such, I think we managed to combine the action gameplay of Mario and the turn-based RPG system in a way no one has seen before. It didn't take long to establish that Mario was in a whole new environment. The story started similarly to any other game in the series. Mario was having a picnic with Princess Toadstool. Bowser showed up in his Koopa clown car, abducted her, and Mario pursued them to Bowser's Keep. The similarities to old Mario games started and end there. The first instinct upon seeing the enemy was to stomp them. That would trigger a turn-based battle sequence, straight out of a JRPG. Instead of taking the fight straight to enemies, Mario would have to take turns with them. However, the battles were far less passive than the ones Final Fantasy fans were used to seeing. With Mario, Nintendo and Square wanted more player input. Fujioka said in his 1995 interview with Family Computer Magazine and Haru, "We really wanted to make an RPG where the player is always engaged with the controls. In RPGs, there's usually a lot of waiting. The majority of time is probably spent not pressing buttons. In fact, but pressing buttons, the controls themselves, that's a huge part of the fun. This may reveal a bit of our battle system, but you can definitely get through Mario RPG just by applying standard RPG strategies. But for those who want to get the most of the experience, we've added some elements which allows a moment of action in the gameplay. In other words, a moment of greater Mario-ness. The quote, "a moment of greater Mario-ness," would ultimately become the timed hit system. When any character attacks, there's a small window where the player can hit a button and score a second, or even multiple extra hits. It removed a lot of the normal tedium of the standard turn-based RPG, and would revolutionize the genre, with future RPG developers finding different ways to build on the time hit formula. For Super Mario RPG, the time hit mechanic was one of the many ways that the game managed to blend together the best elements of both Nintendo and Squaresoft. It's hard to believe that it originally stemmed from a children's toy. Super Mario RPG co-director Yoshihiko Makawa told IGN in a 2013 interview. This was very much inspired by a children's toy that was available in Japan at the time. There was like a large laptop with these buttons that would play music. You had to press the buttons with good timing to the music. It was that idea, having gameplay built around timing button presses, that inspired me to hybridize these two genres of game, to get a little bit of action and RPG into the same game. However, a standard tour of the Mushroom Kingdom, as was the case in previous Mario games, wouldn't be enough for a Super Mario RPG. The RPG genre, especially the Final Fantasy series that Squaresoft made famous, was all about epic adventures and the highest stakes imaginable. As great of a threat that Bowser was for this game, Nintendo and Square had to think bigger. How does one get started making Mario's world bigger than ever before? For starters, Super Mario RPG changed the perspective that fans had been accustomed to for over a decade. Super Mario RPG co-director Chihiro Fujioka said in a 1995 interview with Family Computer Magazine and Haru, "I think our decision to use an isometric view, 3D, in other words, really brings the world of Mario to life. The usual complaint about isometric visuals is that, yeah, they look pretty, but they do make the controls difficult. While that's true, the 3D isometric view allows us to show Mario's world in a way never seen before. So I think it was the right choice." While Square had pushed Super Nintendo to its hardware limits with games like Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy III in the United States, Super Mario RPG was an even greater leap forward. The isometric 3D style would require far greater CPU power. That's why Nintendo ultimately suggested the use of the SA1 chip, which had 4 times the processing power of the Super Nintendo's native CPU. While each individual world had some pop to it, they wouldn't come to life in the same way without the SA1 chip to give them an extra dimension. Beyond the perspective, Super Mario RPG is remembered for taking Mario beyond the Mushroom Kingdom. Is the Mushroom Kingdom still part of the game? It is, although it turns out to be a comparatively smaller piece of a much bigger picture. That's evidenced by the game's opening minutes, when a typical battle between Mario and Bowser is interrupted by a force from beyond. When a mysterious and powerful entity named Smithy crashed down from the skies above and shattered the star rod on his way down, it opened Mario's world in ways unimaginable just years prior. His arrival created such a force that it blew Princess Toadstool and Bowser to parts unknown, and scattered the 7 powerful star pieces to different corners of the world. Finding the princess, locating the star pieces, and confronting Smithy meant having to leave the vicinity of the Mushroom Kingdom. Super Mario RPG's supporting cast was really one of the earliest indicators that life went beyond Princess Toadstool's domain. During his first visit to the Mushroom Kingdom, Mario encountered a funny frog-looking thing named Mallow, who got robbed by a fast-talking thief named Croco. After helping Mallow, Smithy's invasion began in full force. Further along, when the villain known as Mac the Knife's hostile takeover was thwarted, it came time for Mario to explore the world in earnest. This was where Mario's world truly opened up. The overworld map felt less like themed lands of the Mario platformers, but more like fleshed-out landscapes filled with actual people. Rose Town was a sleepy forest village filled with mushroom civilians. Moleville was a land of blue-collar mole people, and Marymore was a city whose entire economy relied on extravagant marriages. All of that is standard RPG fare. But the town that becomes truly mind-blowing to Mario fans is Monstro Town, which opened up the idea that Bowser's minions can live peacefully with like-minded reformed monsters. They don't renounce Bowser necessarily, but they seek out life that doesn't involve trying to take over the Mushroom Kingdom or attempting to kill Mario. It's a wild concept that's taken for granted today, but one that got its start here. The dangerous, adventure-filled areas were so unlike anything in a Mario game to that point. That's mainly because of the surprisingly three-dimensional characters that inhabited them. Kirosaurus was a standard sewer stage, but stood out because of the nightmare monster Bellum, who loved to eat people. The sunken ship and its surrounding ocean could have been an average water level if not for Jonathan Jones, the scourge of the seas who fights with honor. The Barrel Volcano is a harrowing environment filled with fiery monsters and a fearsome dragon, but there's a wacky merchant named Hinopio who has somehow run a lucrative business within its steps. The other key to opening up the Mario world is through the idea of legend. In prior games, Mario was considered a hero. In Super Mario RPG, he is a legend. When characters from outside the Mushroom Kingdom meet him, they're starstruck. They've realized they're in the presence of a larger-than-life hero. Tales of his exploits have spread far beyond the Mushroom Kingdom's borders, to the point that some of the game's characters don't even believe he's real. That goes a long way towards making Mario's world feel like a much bigger place, and one of Super Mario RPG's coolest ideas involves having that player jump in the middle of certain conversations. What's a simple action in old platformers is mythology come to life for many of the minor characters in Super Mario RPG. But when we talk about opening Mario's horizons, it's hard to grasp the gravity of its significance through the silent protagonist. Since Mario never speaks, that leaves sidekick Mallow as one of the player's primary windows into what's beyond the Mushroom Kingdom. His story of trying to discover his true heritage puts him in a unique position of helping present the greater Super Mario RPG world. Like the players, and like Mario, Mallow is seeing all of this for the first time too. He's the everyman standing in contrast with the rest of the cast. He's not the legendary hero that Mario is, the reviled villain that Bowser is, the regal ruler that Toadstool is, or the celestial being that Geno is. But until the final moments of the game, nothing illustrates the size and scope of Mario's world more than the story twist that Mallow is the prince of the Skyward Kingdom. It's both a sign that Mario and Mallow inhabit the same world, but they both have their own kingdoms and their own stories to live out. And while Mario has had some memorable end credit celebrations in the past, few make the Mario mythos feel bigger than the Disneyland Main Street Electrical Parade style celebration that comes after defeating Smithy. It's a sequence that makes every location feel significant. It makes players want to visit those places again, and it makes them want to return to them in the future. Sadly, that last part is never meant to be, but that's a story for later. For more video features and everything else gaming related, you're already in the right place. You're on Shacknews.com.